The radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Yaron Brook Show. And this, what is it? It's Friday, November 4th. As you can see, still on the road. I am now in Denver, Colorado. I'm looking out the window here, and there's construction right in front of my face. But if I can look just beyond the construction, there's downtown Denver on my right, and the amazing, beautiful Rocky Mountains right in front of me. So, a beautiful sight. Anyway, Denver, when the sun is shining as it is today, and the sky is blue as it is today, is a pretty special place, a pretty beautiful place. Sadly, it's unusual for me to come to Denver and for the weather to be this good, but the weather's really nice right now. All right, I'm exhausted, so you'll have to bear with me a little bit today. I want to give you a little bit of an update on kind of what's been going on, and I did yesterday. I did a debate on capitalism versus socialism. It should be up on the website of the Steamboat Institute. So if you search on YouTube Steamboat Institute, you'll be able to find the video. I think that they've got a debate series, and this is their latest debate. So you can find it in the Steamboat Institute's YouTube channel. I think it was an interesting debate. It's a guy I've debated in the past a few times. I think 4 times in 2019. He has become, my sense is he's become less of a socialist, much more respectful of markets over that time. And it was hard to get him to disagree with much of what I said. A few places here and there he disagreed, but overall, I think it was a good debate. I think those who were there learned something, benefited from it, but it wasn't quite as fiery as a debate as you'd expect with a socialist. Something's crooked over here. I don't know. Maybe it's not crooked. You tell me if it appears crooked on your screen, but not play around with it too much. Anyway, that was yesterday. We had about 200 people in the audience, a really good turnout. There was a lot of students, which is really good. It was at the University of Colorado Springs. It was dominated by, I'd say, people on my side dominated the audience, which is surprising for a university campus, but maybe not for Colorado Springs, which is quite a conservative place. In the audience, surprising to me, I learned after the fact, because he came up and said hello or introduced himself. We'd met before, but I don't think he remembered that, was Vernon Smith. I don't know if you guys know who Vernon Smith is, but Vernon Smith won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2002. He is a free market economist, one of the free market economists who won Nobel Prizes in the past. He is, I believe, over 100 years old. I might be wrong, maybe he's 98 or 99. But he was there, he came up, congratulated me, made a comment about one of the arguments, and still sharp. Still with it, and about 100 years old. So that was fun. It was fun to see Vernon Smith. The last time I saw Vernon Smith, he was angry with me, and he was in the audience at an event, probably in 2019. I think it was 98 then. Anyway, he was in the audience in 2019 at an event in Dallas that I did, where I argued that religion was incompatible with liberty, and this is at a Montpelier Society meeting, and he got really upset. He used to be an atheist and become religious later in life, very late in life, and argued, pretty aggressively with me that no, religion was necessary for liberty. So it was good that this time he thought I did well and didn't have anything to contradict me. So that was, it was nice that they came out to an event like that. It was nice to see somebody at about 100, maybe a little less, maybe a little more, around 100 years old, still as sharp and engaged as he is. So that was good. What else about yesterday's event? I mean, Steamboat always does a good job, so I congratulate them. Hopefully, I'll be able to do more events with them. It was a good event. It was well run. It was well managed, and as I said, the audience was really good in terms of numbers. I want to say something about the event I did on Wednesday night in San Francisco. I don't think I've talked about that event. I think I did a show just before that event. And I think last show, or maybe the show before that, maybe it was last show, somebody made, in the super chat, somebody made a comment, aren't you, Yaron, talking too much about Tucker Carlson? Aren't you talking too much about these post-liberals, about all this negative stuff, their negativity and so on? And I kind of almost agreed with that and suggested, yeah, maybe there's too much of that and everything. Well, after Wednesday night, I am recommitted to no. The problem is we don't talk about them enough. And it's really, 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 really important that we talk about them more and we make arguments against them and we analyze what they say. And so I'm going to be doing more, not less, of that. Because what happened on Wednesday was a debate. It was a debate with me debating basically the audience. It's a kind of an interesting, weird format, which I'll describe in a minute. But basically, the audience, the event was put on by the Hamilton Society, which was a kind of a group of young men. I think it's all men, but I think they're Catholic, they're religious, they're conservatives, and they've created this kind of debating society in San Francisco. The members and the people who attend these events are all startup founders, the ambitious people within Silicon Valley. These are the entrepreneurs. These are the people creating technology, and some of them were students. So I talked to some of them. Some of them were students, like computer science students at Stanford or at Berkeley. So these are the people who came to the event. This is the kind of the future of Silicon Valley, and in that sense, the future of the U.S. economy. There were a lot of people there. There were over 200 people in attendance at this thing. The event was a debate. The proposition was Christianity will destroy the West. I defended that proposition, so it was my argument to make. I made a speech for about 15 minutes. I think I was supposed to talk for 15. I think I talked for 20. And then a short Q&A, and then other people could make speeches. The chairman, kind of the person who runs the Hamilton Society, made a speech, and then he answered questions, and then other people in the audience could make speeches. So you could make a 5-minute speech, and then I made a speech, and then at the end there was something called a duel, where me and the chairman of the society went at it, kind of debate style, but kind of really quick back and forth debate style, which was a lot of fun. I really, really enjoyed it, and I think everybody did it. Shockingly, in spite of the fact that the audience, and this is the surprise, right? So the audience, entrepreneurs, computer science people, technology people, overwhelmingly religious. And I got a standing ovation at the end. So at the very end, when he thanked me, I mean, literally all these people stood up. I just argued that Christianity was a disaster. It was going to destroy the world. It was a horrible, the whole idea of religion and Christianity particularly were horrible ideas and so on. And in spite of that, they gave me a standing ovation. So I was pretty blown away with that. I think I did a good job, and it was certainly a lot of fun. I'll state that again. And and the quality of the audience was high. But here's the thing that really struck me, and the reason why I'm going to be talking a lot more about these crazies on the right. At least, I think there were two, but at least one explicitly, one of the speeches, there weren't that many speeches given, one of the speeches, tried to make the argument by a young guy, I'm sure really smart, again from tech, made a speech basically arguing that that Western civilization was fundamentally a civilization of Europeans and only Europeans, and it was not about ideas. It was not at all about ideas. That it was purely an issue of blood, if you will. I mean, the guy who made it was a Spaniard, so I suggested he do a 23andMe and discover how European he really was, and I told him that the Spanish empire probably had more to do, had more. Probably was successful more because of the Islamic empire that had been there before them, the Muslim empire that had been there before them, than anything European. Anyway, I rebucked what he said, and everything. But the very notion that he would say Western civilization is about being white, basically, European. And he was not the only one who said that. There's one other speech that was similar to that, slightly different spin. Okay, so that was one speech. And then a number of people came up to me afterwards, and we were talking. And one of them wanted to defend the ideas of Curtis Yarvin. We'll talk more about Curtis Yarvin in future shows. Maybe we'll take a video or article of his and analyze it, because I think it's worth doing. Or maybe we'll have Nikos on, and Nikos has read a lot of Curtis Yarvin, and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that as well. I think he's important. He's a thinker, arguably, an intellectual, arguably, behind much of what's going on in Silicon Valley in terms of a shift to the right. But he believes in a monarchy. He believes in running the country like a corporation. The country should be run by a CEO with authoritarian power. Anyway, so that came up, and a number of people were like nodding ahead and supporting. And then another guy, was kind of, we were going back and forth, and at some point he looked at me with this puzzled look on his face, and he said, I mean, with a real puzzled look, because I think this was authentic, he said, "Is you against white nationalism?" And I got angry, because that is white nationalism is such a despicable idea, that I really got angry. And he looked really puzzled and taken aback by the fact that I would get angry by this, that this would somehow be something I would really get upset about, that I thought that those were really bad. In other words, Tucker Carlson, the post-liberals, generally the kind of anti-Western civilization nutcases, are really having an impact out there. They really have an influence. And these are young people. By the way, a number of them came up to me and said, and many of the ones who came up to me and said this were these kind of white nationalists and were the kind of, Curtis Yarvin and some of them quite religious. They came up to me and said, yeah, we listen to your podcast a lot. And the guy who actually said about Western civilization is European said he'd heard one of my podcasts and I had said X, Y, Z. So these people are listening to what I have to say. And it's really, really important that we start making arguments against their position. And hopefully they hear them. And hopefully I have some influence on young people and sway them away from these ideas before they latch on to them. Who knows if I can be successful, but we have to try. And these are exactly the kind of people, right? These are successful entrepreneurs, young, still searching for philosophy, ambitious, again, entrepreneurs, tech-oriented, science-oriented, so rational, that we can't afford to lose. And so I'm saying again that it's time to double down on our taking on the right, taking on the bad elements within the right, and analyzing it. And I'm sorry it's so negative, and I'm sorry it's so ridiculous and absurd. And maybe what I need to do is focus in on some of the more intellectuals on the right and try to analyze their positions. Focus, maybe even do more shows about Christianity and focus in on why Christianity is as bad as, why I think it's as bad as it is. Focus on Curtis Yarvin and Patrick Deneen and some of the other intellectuals, and really dig deep into why these ideas are incredibly destructive and why I'm so opposed to it. And maybe even on the issue of racism, which I just have always taken as, no, that's ridiculous. That's evil. How could anybody support it? Maybe I need to come up with some other arguments with it. Kim, who has just done a sticker, thank you, Kim, was at the event. So if you're interested in her perspective on what happened that night, you can ask Kim. So Kim, thank you for being there. And it was fun to meet up with Kim again. I've seen her before at Ocon, I guess, and in Silicon Valley. So we could do that. But so I'm not going to back off, as maybe I suggested I would last time. And in this context, I wanted today to recognize Adam Mossoff. Adam Mossoff, who's been on the show in the past and is a friend and somebody I've known within the objectivist world going back to the mid-1990s, so for a long time. But Adam says, Curtis Yarvin, I've seen better arguments from middle schoolers. Yeah, but we need to rebut them because it turns out that entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley buy into these arguments. So, I mean, I always think, yeah, this is stupid. I don't need to rebut this. Well, maybe we do. Maybe we should make the effort. Maybe we should not assume that everybody just gets it the way some of us do. Anyway, Adam, who I've known since the 90s, been part of the objectivist kind of community for since then, and has been on the show at least twice, maybe more than that, maybe three times, maybe. Anyway, Adam just put out a letter, which I think is an important letter. It's a letter of resignation from the Heritage Foundation. He was, it turns out, I didn't know this, but he was a visiting fellow at the Edward Meese III Center for Legal and Judicial Studies at the Heritage Foundation, and he resigned. And so I want to read parts of the letter. Now, I did not get a copy of the letter, but I assume it's okay that I'm reading it because Adam allowed the letter to be published on Twitter. It was published by Ilya, which Ilya? One of the Ilyas published it. Ilya Shapiro. There's Ilya Shapiro and there's Ilya Soman, and I get them mixed up, and everybody gets them mixed up, which to their chagrin. Anyway, it's a powerful letter of resignation, so I thought it would be worth reading it out. This is one more resignation in a series of people leaving Heritage Foundation and resigning over what has happened over the last few weeks that we've covered here regarding Heritage. I think it's super important that that the good stand up against evil, and in this case, Heritage is representing evil. And stand up against it and quit, but also explain why they quit. I've seen some people resigning from Heritage without really saying why. So what I like about Adam, what I like about this is Adam published a letter, and now it's made public, and everybody can see exactly why Adam has left Heritage Foundation. And I think that is important because it's a moral stand, it's an intellectual stand, it's a philosophical stand. And it is important. So I'm going to read you from the letter. It basically is addressing all these things that we're talking about in terms of what is going on the right and the evil in the evil on the right. Somebody wants to make the point that Adam backed Trump. Yes, he did. In spite of that, I mean, he backed Trump because of Israel. I think he was on my show and said that the number one issue for him was anti-Semitism in Israel, and he backed Trump because of that. And after October 7th, he didn't see a choice. I understand that. As I said, the fact that somebody voted for Trump, I get why some people voted for Trump. Anyway, here's Adam. It is with a heavy heart that I'm resigning my visiting fellow position in the Edward Meese III Center for Legal and Judicial Studies at the Heritage Foundation. My resignation is effective immediately. I'm going to skip because it's a long letter. Unfortunately, your October 30th video and your subsequent interviews, videos, and commentary have made it clear to me that Heritage is no longer the storied think tank that I was proud to join in 2019. Now, Adam and I might disagree about the storied think tank, but that's not the point. He goes on. Your October 30th video was indefensible. So were your purported explanations and backtracking in subsequent interviews and social media posts. The October 30th interview was worse than a poor choice of words or a mere mistake. It was a profound moral inversion to use the language of ancient anti-Semitic blood libel, such as globalist class and venomous coalition. It was especially loathsome to use this language to defend Tucker Carlson. Tucker is quickly following Candace Owen down the very dark path of Jewish conspiracy theories and defenses of Nazis. After Candace's explanation, Tucker is quickly following Candace Owen down after Candace's explanation a couple of years ago of Kristallnacht as burning of communist books and not an attack on Jews, This was the final straw for me, and my judgment has been repeatedly confirmed by her in the ensuing years. Similar to Candace's just asking questions strategy, Tucker is increasingly hosting friendly, head-nodding in agreement interviews with people who explicitly praise Nazis and are unrepentant in their anti-Semitic slurs of Jews in Israel, such as his interview of Daryl Cooper and Agapia, a name I can't pronounce. Tucker's friendly, smiling interview with Nick Fuentes, an avowed Nazi, who was simply the nadir of Tucker's increasing number of friendly interviews with nihilists and anti-Semites. In all of these interviews, Tucker has blatantly refused to challenge any of their calumnies, propaganda, and falsehoods, despite your subsequent claim in a follow-on statement on October 31st that we should, quote, challenge them head-on, unquote, in open debate. This bears emphasizing Tucker has never challenged one of these evil guests on his show. For example, in a 2-hour interview with Fuentes, Tucker never asked Fuentes a single question about his Nazi views or even his Nazi slur of Vice President J.D. Vance as a race traitor, given J.D. Vance's marriage to Usha, Usha and their so-called brown children, to quote Fuentes. This is neither debate nor critical engagement with ideas with which we profoundly disagree. This is toleration and or agreement with evil ideologies and ideas. This is made even more clear by Tucker's contrary treatment of anyone he deemed to be a, quote, Zionist, unlike his interview with Fuentes, Cooper, and Agrapia, and many others. Tucker engages in skeptical interviews with pointed, hard-hitting questions of Senator Ted Cruz and others about their Zionist or pro-Israel positions. All this makes it absolutely clear that Tucker gives credence to his millions of viewers that evil ideologies, collectivism, nihilism, and anti-Semitism are consistent with conservatism and America First movement. Tucker's friendly and laughing conversation with Fuentes signals to his millions of young viewers that it is permissible to give a pass to such evil. Even in their best light possible, Tucker makes clear we at least should tolerate such evil, because as you said in your October 30th video, we should not be, quote, attacking our friends on the right. This is a massive moral inversion. This is the opposite of what Heritage Foundation stood for over many decades in American political discourse. It stands in the opposite of the ideas of the Founding Fathers in the Declaration of Independence and Constitution, inalienable natural rights, limited government, rule of law, and free markets, and the flourishing society that results from these ethical and political commitments. Although you told us in the town hall last Thursday that you made a mistake in your October 30th video, you have not retracted or withdrawn the video. It remains on your X account with more than 24 million views to date. Thus, it remains unclear precisely and specifically what you regard as your moral mistake and failure in leadership. This is compounded by the mixed messages that you have been giving to us in the world about the lessons you have learned. You have continually reiterated, for example, your claim in your October 30th video, we should not cancel our friends, and that Tucker always will be a close friend of the Heritage Foundation. As far as I'm aware, you have not disavowed this claim, but you falsely conflated here the struggle sessions and cancellation campaigns that the woke left inflict on their apostates and heretics with the proper, steadfast moral condemnation of nihilism, collectivism, Nazism, and Jew hatred. Aristotle observed in his seminal treatise on ethics that in a choice between truth and friendship, it is to truth that we must always give our primary allegiance. Even with your mixed messages, one thing is clear. By your words and actions, Heritage is wedded to Tucker and everything he has come to represent on the periphery of the Groyper movement created by Fuentes. Instead of the truth, you've chosen a false friend of the American ideas that Heritage was supposed to represent. This, in the abstract, this profound failing of truth and justice would give me serious pause and I would still ultimately resign. But it's even more pressing today to call out this moral failing and to take a stand. It is still shocking to me that the worst single-day slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust, the invasion and attack of Israel on October 7, 2023, was unleashed a tsunami of violent anti-Semitism that has swept Europe and the US in the past 2 years. Woke brown shirts have been screaming genocidal slogans in the streets on university campuses. They have been doing much worse than merely screaming slogans like Free Palestine and From the Rivers to the Sea. They've acted in harassing and assaulting American Jews, firebombing and vandalizing homes and businesses, and murdering American Jews in DC, Colorado, and California. This has never happened before in the US. The nihilist and collectivist bigotry has driven woke leftists into frenzies unseen in the West since the original Nazi brown shirts terrorized Jews in Germany in the 20s and 30s, and has now reared its ugly head in the American political right. Now is the time to differentiate the right and the left, not to join the left in embracing this toxic fusion of collectivism and anti-Semitism. He continues, you make clear your choice. Endorsement and toleration of false friends of freedom, rights, liberty, and the American ideals of the Founding Father, despite their Orwellian claims to the contrary that they are advocates of America First or represent conservatism. Worse than false friends, they have proven to be advocates of the evil ideologies that seek to destroy these achievements of Western civilization as represented by the United States of America. I cannot stand by in silence. It is time for choosing. I choose to resign. So I think a powerful letter. I want to congratulate Adam for doing this. It's not easy, although, you know, given how bad things are, maybe it is easy. It's not easy to leave a post. It's not easy to stand up to your boss and to your peers. It's not easy to make this public and take a moral stand in public in this way. Adam is you know, in that world of think tanks and conservatives and small L libertarians, we'll call it. You know, think tanks in Washington D.C. He's part of that world, and he's taken a courageous stand here, and I give him credit for that. And I think he's absolutely right in his diagnosis of heritage and current heritage, and where it is heading, and kind of the moral travesty of what Roberts did, as we talked about on the show. So if you'd like to read the letter, you can find it on Twitter. Again, Ishapiro published it, so just look up Ishapiro, and you will find. I think you will find the letter. It's worth reading. If you know Adam, it's worth sending out Adam congratulations for resigning from Heritage, even though, again, I'm sure it was not an easy professional thing. Oh, maybe it was easy. Again, given the stakes, for Adam, it probably was easy, but again, not professionally not easy, I'm sure. Okay, yeah, I mean, this battle will continue. It is great to having more people. It is important to have more people join the fight. It's important to call out the left and the right on these kind of issues. I have said for a long time, and not everybody's going to agree with me, that I think the right is to a large extent the larger enemy, the enemy that I think worries me more, because it is to some extent affiliated with where we are and what we represent. So again, I'm glad to see more people join this battle. We will be talking much more about this in the weeks, months, and probably years to come. It's not going to get any easier. It's not going to get any better. As I saw in Silicon Valley, in San Francisco, it is spreading. It is spreading. By the way, I hope to return to that, to the Hamilton Society again, to do more debates. I'm hoping to engage with them, because I think engagement, again, some of those views are horrific and really horrible, But the people who run the Hamilton Society are not the people who actually presented those views. Those are some of the people who attended the talk. And, they're religious. We disagree, but we need to have this conversation, and we need to be able to present rational ideas to people who might be open to still changing their minds about some of the really horrible positions that they have. And the damage Tucker is doing in our world, that Candace is doing, that J.D. Vance is doing, that Patrick Deneen is doing, that J.D. Vance is doing, it really is unimaginable. It really is unimaginable. Chandler says Yaron is the devil. I don't think the devil is the right terminology. I think the terminology these days is Yaron is the Antichrist. I think that is the terminology that Peter Thiel is spreading. It's the Antichrist. Okay, so that is Adam's letter to Heritage, which I thought was worth reading to everybody. I just want to add one thing, just because I came across this as I was preparing the show, again from Tucker Carlson, just to keep you up to speed about Tucker Carlson. It turns out that in this morning's newsletter that Tucker Carlson published, he publishes, I guess, a weekly newsletter, Tucker finally found people who he believes are really, really proper to call and compare to the Nazis. It's not Fuentes. It's not Candace. It's actually Israelis. Israelis. And Jews like Ben Shapiro and Mark Levin. He writes about them. These people are sick. He makes the argument that in the Old Testament, he makes an Old Testament argument about the Jews, right? The Jews, and about the Jewish, supposedly the Jewish blood superiority, right? He says there's no such thing as blood superiority. I agree. And then he says those who disagree, like the IDF's leaders, Israeli Defense Forces leaders, have more in common with Adolf Eichmann than Jesus. So the IDF leaders, he has decided, believe in blood superiority. I don't know any IDF leaders who believe that. He says have more in common with Adolf Eichmann than Jesus. It's pretty sick. Tucker Carlson is really evil, sick, bad, horrific, all of the above. Don't have anything to do with him. And ideally, don't subscribe, don't have anything to do with him. Sanction him. Oh, by the way, Troy came in. Thank you, Troy, with 500 Australian dollars. So thank you, Troy. That is incredibly generous and very much appreciated. I know we had some other stickers from Kim. I said that earlier, and I think there was Rue Down. So thank you guys. All right. Let's talk a little bit about housing. A bunch of small stories about housing, but kind of that struck me. There's a post going around. I think it was published like 2 or 3 days ago. November 12th. So 2 days ago it was published a post. It has a beautiful picture. This is on Twitter. Beautiful picture of a house. It looks like a pretty big house. This particular house, I think, is about 3,550 square feet. It looks kind of it's like what you consider a classic American 2-story. There's an attic. There might be a basement, but in a very lots of trees. Beautiful, beautiful house, right? I mean, not my style architecture, but a big, distinguished house. And the heading goes: an average working class man could buy this house in the 1950s, support 4 kids and stay home wife. Today, a 2-income household can't even buy eggs without going into debt. What the F is going on? Many people on Twitter have pointed out, and this is part of the dangers of Twitter, that this house in the 1950s would have required, an income that is probably in the top 1%. This is far, far, far from average working class. A salary could afford this house. An average working class salary in the 1950s, an average house in the 1950s, was about 1,000 to 1,200 square feet. So about a third of the size of this house. It was one story and pretty simple and pretty bare. Not in this kind of neighborhood, and certainly not this kind of size, and not kind of this prosperity. And people since then have been posting photos making fun of this. Somebody posted a photo of the White House, and said in the 1970s, a peanut farmer, referring to Jimmy Carter, could buy this house, with 4 kids and stay-at-home mom and everything. So a lot of people are making fun of this. But I think it's important to note that, and we've talked about this a lot in the show, and we'll keep talking about it because it keeps coming back, this ridiculous nostalgia to some imagined 1950s utopia is bizarre and wrong and deceiving and dishonest, fundamentally dishonest. There was no, dream utopia in the 1950s. In the 1950s, people did not live better lives. They were not wealthier. It's not true that you could afford all these wonderful things on one salary that you can't today. Our standard of living, quality of life, our homes, our cars, our technology, our washing machines and dryers and air conditioning, and the million other gadgets that we have in a home that didn't exist back then, and just the sheer size of the homes and plots of land and everything, so outstrip anything that was happening in the 1950s that it's just incomparable how much better life is today. And yet both the left and the right, for different reasons, harken back to the 1950s as if there's some ideal. So no. This is a complete lie, and it's a lie being constantly repeated and perpetrated. Don't fall for it, and when you hear it, speak up against it, because it's part of this idea of going backwards. And I hope that one of the things I represent is an anti-stagnation perspective. My perspective is, if you don't grow, if you don't move forward, then you go backwards. And growing backwards means, or growing backwards doesn't make any sense. You stop growing, if you stop growing, you start shrinking. And shrinking means death. Shrinking means approaching death. So life requires growth. Life requires forward progress. Life requires ambition into the future. And these kind of pictures and memes and ideas are destructive to that ambition and moving forward. This veneration of a past is just pathetic and ridiculous. Talk about pathetic and ridiculous. And housing. J.D. Vance, in an interview, I think yesterday, said the following. And we've talked about the fact that housing prices, particularly on the coast, are expensive. Housing prices have gone up significantly, although, again, the extent to which they've gone up, to the extent to which housing is unaffordable, to the extent to which young people can't afford houses, is vastly and horrifically exaggerated by both left, Mamdani, and right. Everybody in the right. The victim and grievance mentality is now shared by left and right, and both aggressively pitching grievances, and one of the big grievances is housing. Anyway, J.D. Vance, responding to that, said this. A lot of young people are saying housing is way too expensive. Why is that? Because we flooded the country with 30 million illegal immigrants who were taking houses that ought by right to go to American citizens. Now, there's so much wrong with this. I mean, again, this is straight out of the kind of leftist zero-sum world perspective. Now, 30 million illegals, where do you get that number? That's a vastly exaggerated number. But this is the guy who talked about Haitian immigrants eating cats in Ohio or wherever it was. So he is not, he lies strategically. He knows exactly what he's doing, and he knows exactly where to exaggerate, where to make up stuff, and repeat it, and then people start believing it. It just becomes part of our culture. So there were no 30 million illegal immigrants. And I thought these illegal immigrants were destitute. I thought they were coming here and sucking on the tit of the state. They were welfare recipients. They had nothing. How did these guys get loans? How did they get a mortgage? Or did they afford the incredibly high prices of mortgages? And if homes are unaffordable to Americans who've lived in the United States and who have jobs and are legal in the United States, how are these houses affordable to illegal immigrants? I don't understand that. That makes absolutely no sense to me, right? That somehow these houses are affordable to illegal immigrants. But even if it were the case that we had a large immigration into the country, and let's assume that these immigrants are hardworking, they're making money so they can afford a house, then the reason house prices are going up is not because of this massive immigration coming in. It's because we're not building homes fast enough in order to fulfill the new demand. Why isn't the response, we should have built more houses? And what about this idea of taking houses that ought by right to go to American citizens? I mean, I know the left believes that you have a right to basic income and a right to food and a right to healthcare and a right to education and maybe even a right to housing. Now it turns out that J.D. Vance believes that Americans have a right to housing. By right? Homes are now a fixed pot that the government allocates by right to the deserving class. And the deserving class are people who have, I don't know, American ancestral blood. Maybe we should allocate houses based on how many generations have been in America. Maybe that's how we should allocate houses, not by price, because they're expensive, but just by, if your ancestors fought in the Civil War, you get a house. A War of Independence, you get 2 houses. World War II, maybe half of a house. I don't know. So the more ancient your bloodline, the bigger a house you get. Something like that. I mean, J.D. Vance repeatedly engages in collectivistic, zero-sum, central planning thinking. And one of my goals over the next 3 years is going to be to do everything that I can to discredit J.D. Vance. Now, so that he does not become the Republican nominee in 2028. Now, I tried to do that with Trump. It didn't work. But partially because I thought that January 6th would finish Trump off, and it didn't. But here we have a specific target, J.D. Vance. I want to make sure that this guy is so discredited, at least by people who listen to my show, that he is not the nominee. And to do that, we'll talk about J.D. Vance, we'll talk about Tucker Carlson and Fuentes, because I think they're all related. And clearly, he is the candidate of Tucker Carlson, they're good friends. But I don't think I have any influence, but to the extent that I have influence, I'm hoping that we don't get to a position in 2028 where a bunch of you and a bunch of other objectivists think that J.D. Vance is the best candidate out there, and that objectivists should support him, because by then, hopefully, we have discredited enough, shown how collectivistic, zero-sum, central planning he is, and how culturally horrific he is in terms of his views, that won't even be an option. All right. Somebody says the 1950s were an aberration in American history and was never the norm. No, I don't think the 1950s were an aberration, but they weren't that great. I mean, people forget that in the early 1950s, many families had to double up in homes. Veterans came back from World War II, and it took them a while to get up on their feet and to get good jobs and to, and the GI Bill made it possible for them to go get an education, but then they had to start from somewhere, and they started from nothing, and the economy had to recover from the horrors of the Great Depression and the World War. So the 1950s were a period of struggle and a period of much difficulty. And yes, the economy did very, very well because it had been deregulated in the late 1940s. And the Federal Reserve did a decent job of not inflating the economy. And it did okay, it did well. But it wasn't like, whoa, I mean, 1950s, amazing, stunning. It wasn't that great. Okay, finally, a piece of good news also about housing, which is interesting, and that is that the Institute for Justice, which is a free market, pro-American, legal firm that basically sues the government over violations of individual rights, is now suing the government and hopes to take this case to the Supreme Court. It's suing the government about rent control. It is a lawsuit that is suing this idea of rent control as a taking, as a constitutional violation of the takings clause. Now they're doing it on a limited basis. That is, they're not challenging all rent control schemes, because they're not sure they could win that. They're hoping to win this one. Again, a lot of these legal institutions like Pacific Legal Foundation and IJ view this as incremental. You get good rulings that overturn bad laws, and then you expand that. Here they're looking at apartments that are basically sitting vacant because rent control would allow them to charge rent that is so low, only charge rent that is so low that it doesn't make any sense for these people to actually rent their apartment out. Here's an example. This is an apartment in Manhattan. It contains 2 bedrooms, and the legal rent is set at $700 a month. Can you imagine that? In Manhattan, $700 a month with 2 bedrooms. The apartment became vacant in 2019 after a long-term tenancy. The last tenant was in the apartment for over 40 years. It's sat vacant ever since because it simply doesn't make sense for this company who owns the apartment to rent the apartment out for $700 a month. According to the law, they have to renovate this apartment. They have to bring it up to code. They have to, upgrade furnishings, and not to luxury, just at the basic level that the regulations demand. That would cost so much money that they would never recoup the investment for $700 a month. So they would rather just let it sit there empty than make the investment to bring it up to code. Now, the argument is that by limiting their ability to rent it at a higher rate, the government is basically violating the takings clause of the Constitution. Supposedly, Justice Thomas, at least, in a opinion that he wrote a few years ago, gave an opening to challenging the whole idea of rent control from a constitutional basis. And IJ is filing this lawsuit with the idea of taking it to the Supreme Court and hoping to at least overrule some aspects of rent control, which would be amazing. I mean, some of the best things happening in the world today are the things that organizations like IJ and Pacific Legal Foundation are doing. They are fighting in the courts for more freedom. They are being, quite successful. And some of the best news that we have in terms of liberty and freedom comes from these lawsuits that they are bringing. So congratulations to IJ for bringing this lawsuit. And we'll follow it and hope that they win in the Supreme Court and we get to overturn at least a portion of rent control. And that maybe will set the stage for doing away with rent control completely, finally. And that would be pretty amazing. All right, let's see, where are we? We want to talk about, that's housing. Oh yeah, more good news. This good news is on the tariff front. Donald Trump and his administration, which have for months and months and months and months now, told us over and over and over again that tariffs do not raise prices, that indeed tariffs are being paid by foreign manufacturers, have changed their minds. It turns out, according to them, that in spite of the fact that tariffs don't raise prices, if you eliminate tariffs, prices go down. That's miraculous. hard to imagine, hard to understand how that works, but hard to believe. Anyway, in an executive order this afternoon, this Friday, Donald Trump has slashed tariffs on a number of agricultural products. Important to say, these are all tariffs that he put in place. So he slashed his own tariffs. These are not ancient tariffs, tariffs that he put. He has slashed them in an effort, explicit effort, to bring down the cost of grocery prices. Now, I know many of you complained that I did not believe in the tariffs, that tariffs were just aimed at they didn't raise prices because foreigners paid them. Even Donald Trump now understands that tariffs raise prices. Stunning. So, yeah, if you want to buy oranges or tomatoes or bananas, or much more importantly, if you want to buy coffee or cocoa, chocolate, and tea, prices are going to go down because tariffs have just been slashed on all those products. Also, beef imports tariffs have been slashed, as well as spices and even some fertilizers. Wow. I mean, I know this has a lot to do with poll numbers that suggest that Americans are very upset about the cost of living. And the cost of living has gone up over the last year to a large extent because of tariffs, which I know the economists who can't predict anything, we have told you over and over and over again, will raise prices. They have to. They have. And even the Trump administration now recognizes that. And to remedy that, they're cutting tariffs. This is great news. I suggest that Trump go all in. This is his great opportunity to change his mind and to actually lower dramatically the cost of living in the United States. How about zero tariffs on everything? Be a revolutionary, Trump. Be a real radical. None of this wishy-washy stuff. Not just on bananas. Cut tariffs on steel and aluminum and automobiles and everything. Everything. Make it zero. You want to make America great again? That's how you do it. Liberate us. Move us towards freedom. That's how you do it. So, yeah. Good news. Prices are going to come down. Your coffee should cost less very, very soon. So excited about the fact that the Trump administration is learning maybe a little lesson, maybe they'll extrapolate it more broadly about tariffs and actually coming to realize that this is, I mean, they even as of also Friday, the Trump administration also announced that those tariffs that they had on Switzerland, you remember, they put like 50% tariffs on Switzerland, on watches and chocolate and stuff like that. It turns out that they are now easing. I don't know what easing means and how much they're easing, but the punishing levies on imports from Switzerland, they're going to be dramatically lower. So, yeah, it's getting to the point where maybe the tariff issue is slowly the impact of it is slowly being reduced. I will say that today I spoke at Leadership Program of the Rockies, which I speak at every year, and both the speaker before me and me both attacked Trump's tariffs in front of a group that usually really resents challenging Trump on anything, and they responded pretty well. So I think the tide has shifted in terms of public opinion about tariffs, and maybe this is one battle where reason and rationality is winning at least a little bit. All right, let me just see. What do we're going to talk about those three items. Okay, one more lengthy one and one shorter ones. I want to talk a little bit about the filibuster, which has been on really on people's minds with the government shutdown and the idea that you needed 60 votes in order to pass this continuing resolution. Why 60? Why not just 51? Why do we need this special thing? And the filibuster, and some people claiming, oh, it's in the Constitution, which it's not. So I want to talk a little bit about filibuster's argument for it and arguments against it, give you a little bit of history of where it comes from, and give you a little sense of what this is about. So the filibuster was really born in 1806. It was in the early Senate, right at the beginning of the Republic. A simple majority could cut off debate using a rule called previous question motion. It's a tool that the House has. And so at some point, you're debating and debating and debating and debating, and okay, enough, we have to vote. In 1806, at the recommendation of Vice President Yaron Brook, the Senate removed this motion as part of a kind of cleaning up the rules. As an unintended consequences, they created the filibuster. The filibuster at the time meant that people could continue debating the issue indefinitely and hold up a vote indefinitely, as long as you kept debating, as long as you kept speaking. And there was no formal mechanism to end debate. And indeed, the first filibusters started in the 1830s and 1840s. Suddenly people realized, whoa, unlimited debate was possible. And we'll never get to vote on this if they keep talking. So the filibuster was born out of neglect, out of unintended consequences of a slight change of a rule. They didn't really know what happened. A filibuster is the idea that you could continue talking, you continue debating, one or several senators, and you can continue doing this so the vote never comes to the floor. And there were examples where this worked. In 1941, Henry Clay's attempt to create a national bank was blocked by a filibuster. In the late 1800s, filibusters increased, often used around civil rights issues and patronage battles. But they were still rare. The Senate met less frequently. There wasn't a lot to vote on. And mostly they just voted. The people didn't filibuster that many issues. During World War I, a group of isolationist senators filibustered a bill that would have armed merchant ships. President Wilson demanded reform. He thought this was unacceptable. And so they introduced what was called the cloture rule. And this was a rule that said that you could cut off debate if 2/3 of the Senate voted to cut the debate off. If 2/3 voted, the debate was cut, and the issue would go to a vote. Right? In the 30s through the 1960s, filibusters became associated with blocking civil rights legislation. Southern Democrats used it to filibuster to prevent anti-lynching bills, voting protections, and other civil rights measures. There was even the longest single individual filibuster of the period was Strom Thurmond in 1957, where he spoke straight for 24 hours, 18 minutes against the Civil Rights Act of 1957. And then in 1964, there was a 60-day filibuster where they tried to derail the Civil Rights Act of 1964, but ultimately closure, 2/3 vote, was invoked, and enough senators voted to actually go ahead and vote on the Civil Rights Act. In 1975, there was a decision made that 2/3 was too rigorous of standard, and it was lowered to 60 votes, 2/5 of the full Senate. They also created a two-track system where you could debate on one bill could continue, even if it's being filibustered, while the Senate moved on to other business. Right? And this is what the modern filibuster is. It no longer requires you to non-stop talking. All you have to do really is to threaten a filibuster, that if it comes to a vote, you won't let it because you'll start talking. And that forces a closure vote, and unless you have 60 votes to force a vote, you don't even bring a bill to the floor to be voted on. And that's where we are today. Where we are today is that the filibuster has become a standard tool for the minority party to stop anything the majority wants to pass. All they have to do is threaten a filibuster. Sometimes they do speeches, but mostly they just threaten it. And then you have to have 60 votes, and that's it. That's just accepted norm. Now, this has been eroded a little bit. In 2013, Democrats ended the filibuster for executive branch nominees and lower court federal judges, but the Supreme Court still required 60 votes. In 2017, Republicans ended the filibuster of the Supreme Court nominees, so it only needs 51 votes, and they did that in order to get Neil Gorsuch elected. He wasn't going to get 60. So now all presidential nominees only need 51, but almost all other legislation, with the exception of budget reconciliation, we'll leave that for another time, needs 60 votes in order to basically pass. Again, not in the Constitution, but a part of the way things run. Now, here's the thing. What this does is it gives the minority party veto power if it can stick together. We saw that the Democrats couldn't stick together with regard to the government shutdown. But if they can stick together, they can block, if they have 41 votes, they can block what the majority wants to do. So it protects the minority rights in the Senate. That's part of the positive. It encourages an attempt for bipartisanship. And it prevents big, major swings in the law, for good or for ill. I think the main thing that it does that I like is it slows things down. It forces thought, it forces consideration, it forces the attempt to try to get people from the other party to vote for it. It doesn't allow for big ideological swings. But of course, that's also a problem. It gives the minority exaggerated power. We already have a system of checks and balances. This adds on to that another check and balance, and it gives the minority veto power. So you have to have 60 votes in the Senate to do anything. It paralyzes Congress in the end at the Senate level. The House doesn't have anything like this. It incentivizes gridlock, which I'm for, generally gridlock, and partisanship, which I'm against, tribalism. And this is the problem, that when you want to do good things, it slows them down and stops them. It makes it impossible. So, for example, if today on energy, for example, or environmental regulation, the administration would like to pass bills in the Senate that would actually dramatically reduce regulation of environment and actually liberalize the economy and really make dramatic changes in the world in which we live, it can't do it without getting significant Democratic votes, and we know that significant Democratic votes are not forthcoming. So change for the positive is basically halted. It's stopped. Now, it also prevents a lot of bad stuff from happening. Who knows what this administration would like to pass in terms of voting, in terms of election rules, in terms of immigration, in terms of a lot of other things that I think are dangerous and problematic. And what if the Democrats, as when they had Obama had the White House, the Senate, and the House, they could have passed all kinds of things, socialized health care, Medicare for all, with just 51 votes. So I have to admit, I'm torn. I'd like the good legislation to only require 51 votes and the bad legislation to require 60. I'd like to slow down any negative, bad legislation. On the other hand, people should get what they vote for. And if people vote for political power, for a political party to have the House, the Senate, and the White House, maybe they should be allowed a free fall to pass whatever they can pass. So I'm torn. I'm not, I don't fall clearly on one side or the other. It's frustrating when there's some good bills that never pass. For example, I think there are going to be some bills on the table which dramatically expand health saving accounts, which I think would be really good. I don't think it can pass the Senate because I'm not sure they can get the Democratic votes to get it passed. It would be great to pass that on 51 votes. Environmental deregulations, some of the energy regulations that we want to permanently get rid of, which would be really, really good. Right now I'm not sure. Certainly, this administration cannot get Democratic votes for it. We're in a position where Democrats can't get Republicans to vote with them, and Republicans can't get Democrats to vote for them. Except when it's for expanding government, and then the parties come together. But for shrinking government, you can't get the parties together. So it is a quandary. I don't come down clearly on one side or the other. As I've always said, I like gridlock because I worry that almost any administration, including this one, is going to pass more bad things than good things. More bad things than good things. It's a shame that we don't get the good things, but it's good that we don't get the bad things. So I'm mildly pro-filibuster, but I'm also, American people voted for all this bad stuff. Let them have it. Just like the tariffs. They got the tariffs. Now they're rolling them back. Suffer the consequences of your actions. Voting matters. The best way to prevent this is a kind of divided government. But of course, if you have divided government, it's like a filibuster. You're never going to get the good legislation. So, sadly, in the world in which we live, there's no way to get the good stuff without getting the bad stuff as well. And a filibuster is an example of that. If you do away with it, you get both. If you don't do away with it, you don't get the good stuff. So I'm torn. It's not clear to me which side is better, but generally I tend towards, divided governments and not getting a lot done because I worry about the downside more than about losing out on the upside. In the case of politics, in every other aspect of life, that's not the case. So I'm probably still for the filibuster, in spite of the fact that a lot of things that I'd like to pass are not going to pass. All right, 2 quick stories, and then I'll go to your questions. I know we've got a lot of questions, and I do have a hard stop. So if because of the hard stop, I have to delay some questions to the next show, I apologize, but I'll do the questions on the next show. I answer all questions. I won't lose them. Don't worry. All right, quickly, Jeffrey Epstein. This is still ongoing, right? Now Congress is going to vote on releasing Jeffrey Epstein's content. There's a majority, I think, in the House of Representatives for this to pass. There's probably a majority in the Senate for this to pass. The Democrats will vote for it, and a number of Republicans, and actually a significant number of Republicans, will probably vote for it. Trump tried to stop it. He tried to convince Lauren Boebert, the congresswoman from Colorado, to vote against releasing the Jeffrey Epstein. It didn't go well. She insisted on voting for it. So there was a procedural vote in the House to allow this to come to a vote, and it's going to come to a vote. And I'll expect to see a lot of Jeffrey Epstein files hitting the news. Of course, some Epstein files have already been released. They raise even more suspicions about Trump's relationship with Epstein. Nothing is clear, nothing is obvious, but they just the language of them and the way they're phrased, these emails that Jeffrey Epstein wrote about Trump, suggest that maybe Trump was more involved in what Jeffrey Epstein was doing with young girls than we would believe. We were led to believe. Also, MAGA seems to be shifting in positions from pedophilia to, well, maybe having sex with teenage girls is not pedophilia. Maybe that suggests that there's a lot more about what Trump was doing than anybody wants to admit. Anyway, Trump is responding to this by being very defensive, as he always is, and by going in the attack, which he always does. So Trump has basically told the Department of Justice to start probing the relationship between Epstein and Bill Clinton. So go after Democrats. So basically, Trump's view is if Jeffrey Epstein is going to bring me down, he's going to bring down a bunch of Democrats as well. So I'm all for this. Let's get them all out. Let's get it all out in the open. Let's release everything. I don't understand why it hasn't been released already. Let's release everything. Let's figure out who did what and when. And if that means ending the political careers of a bunch of people, Democrats, Republicans, whatever, fine. I'm all for that. Let's get it out there. Let's get it all out there. It's sad that Trump is saying go after Clinton rather than just go after anybody who deserves to go after, given the facts. That's not how Trump operates. But we will get a lot more Jeffrey Epstein emails and stuff. And it does turn out, just by the emails that have already been released, that a lot of the rich and powerful people who, politicians and businessmen who were associated with Jeffrey Epstein did not, counter to what they say, did not disengage from him even after the allegations about his activities, his pedophilia activities, became public. This continued, and yeah, I mean, there's still a story there. And it does look like we'll know more because Congress is going to force the release of these files. And if Trump if it's a problem for Trump, it'll be interesting to see how MAGA responds to it. Because MAGA is pushing for the release of the files, but then if they come back as Trump did bad stuff, what are they going to do? Are they going to turn against Trump or not? Finally, just to point out that, because I did say in a past show, I think that the Gerald Ford aircraft carrier was delayed in arriving at the Caribbean, and maybe Trump was backing off, going to war with Venezuela and going to war with the cartels. It turns out that no, it's now in the Southern Caribbean. It has joined the other forces in the Caribbean. It is off the shores of Venezuela. This is the largest aircraft carrier in the American fleet, the largest aircraft carrier in the world, I think. Incredibly powerful war machine. I think this is just to increase pressure on Maduro and to try to get him out of Venezuela, to get regime change without a war. But it is also an indication that America is willing to go, I guess, to violent action. The U.S. is continuing to blow ships out of the water for who knows what reason, killing people without any trial, without jury, without any kind of legal framework to justify it, without a declaration of war, without anything, really. It's truly astounding that this is allowed to continue, that nobody is outraged by the fact that the United States is just killing people in the Caribbean Sea through the discretion of, I guess, military commanders. And now there are murmurs of, we're going to launch attacks inside Mexico. We're going to go after cartels wherever they are, which I think is just horrific. I mean, the solution to drug war, or the drugs, is not war with the cartels. The solution to drugs, again, is to legalize them and let local law enforcement take care of them. And if the United States can help local law enforcement contain the violence, then so be it. But get rid of the violence in the United States is not through a war in Mexico and the rest of Latin America. That will be a topic we will be discussing more as developments in the Caribbean Sea, as things develop in the Caribbean Sea. All right. Let's now turn to your questions. So we've got quite a few questions. So that is the news for Friday, November 14th. Again, thank you for joining me. Thank you for all the people who did stickers, primarily Troy, who did 500 Australian dollars. Thank you. Thanks to Jack for a sticker, and thank you, John, for the sticker, and thank you to all the other sticker providers that I thanked before. Normative Randroid as well. I don't think I thanked him before, but especially, as I said, to Troy. We got a lot of $20 questions, so we're going to start with those. And then with our time we have left, we'll do the $5 to $10 questions. And if there's anything left after that, I have a hard stop in 45 minutes. We will take them up on the next show, which will be on Sunday. We'll do a show on Sunday, and we'll cover those. All right. Non-Savage algorithm. Psychopaths are very small in number in modern society. But during the Dark Ages, wasn't most everyone a psychopath? People slaughtered each other on the regular with no remorse. Zero-sum thinking turns us into monsters. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what psychopaths exactly means. I mean, to be a psychopath, I think, is a clinical psychological diagnosis. I don't think slaughtering and murdering people makes you a psychopath. But I don't know. It's a psychological term. I'm not a psychologist. I don't like to diagnose people with those kind of things. It is true that in modern times, killing, slaughtering, raping, pillaging is pretty much unaccepted in civilized society. Now, note that there are plenty of people at our universities who believe that killing, raping, burning people alive, torturing them, is completely okay if you are the so-called oppressed. If you're Palestinian and the people you're killing are Israelis and Jews. So even in a civilized society, while people might not do the things, they are willing to support them because of an ideology. Now, and note that these Palestinians, the Gazans who did this, were behaving like Middle Ages Europeans. So the number of people engaging in slaughter, the number of people willing to engage in slaughter, the number of people capable of rape, pillage, and slaughter is dependent on the state of civilization. The more civilized a place, the fewer people there are who are willing to kill. The more barbaric a place, and here barbarism and civilization has more to do with ideas than anything else, the less slaughter there is. I mean, there's the book Better Angels of Our Nature by Steven Pinker about the levels of violence in society over time. And he shows quite dramatically how over time violence has declined dramatically in the Western world as we became more civilized, which means as we gain more respect for reason and for individualism and for the sanctity of life. And that when we were mystics and collectivists and tribalists, violence was all the rage. So I don't like labeling it a psychological issue rather than a philosophical one. Ideas shape human behavior at the end of the day. When we embrace barbaric ideas, we become barbarians. When we embrace civilized ideas, we become civilized. I mean, it's not quite that simple, but that's the principle. Ian, great performance at the web debate, and good for web debate. That was my debate. That was a debate yesterday, I assume, on socialism, capitalism. And good for Dr. Mossoff. Do you know if Dr. Mossoff regrets his support for Trump in the 2024 election? I don't know. I haven't talked to him, but I don't think so. I think he still views Kamala as a worse choice, particularly on the issue that swayed him, which was the issue of Israel. And maybe there were other issues in which also supported his support for Trump. But next time we have Adam on the show, we can certainly ask him about that, or you can ask him about that. But I don't think he regrets it. And if that's not true, then he will come on the show and tell us otherwise. PB says, I was honored to have Margaret Thatcher, speak at my 1996 commencement. Cool. She spoke on China, the West, and capitalism, saying it would bring democracy to China via voting with dollars. She was right. Was she right? And what was she missing? Well, what she was missing, I think, was the willingness of the Chinese regime to engage in self-preservation, which I think was what happened with Xi in the mid-2010s, where he clamped down on economic freedom in order to preserve the authoritarian nature of the regime. One of the reasons he did that was because she was right, was because that the free markets were moving Chinese to demand more political freedom. You saw that in the post-COVID era as well, with the demonstrations against the shutdowns, the lockdowns. I don't think she saw the willingness of the Chinese government to continue that. Also, I think she overestimated the power of markets free of real philosophical ideas to actually liberate the people. The Chinese are going to have to fight for their freedom. They're going to have to fight for their liberty. I truly believe that one day there will be another Tiananmen Square, and the Chinese people will have to fight back. And to do that, they're going to have to believe in liberty and freedom. To do that, they're going to have to be armed with real ideas, not just, I want to make more money. And not that that's bad, right? Wanting to make more money is good. They need to understand the relationship between political freedom and economic freedom. And they need to demand political freedom. And they need to be willing to fight back for it. They weren't at Tiananmen Square. I mean, they showed incredible courage once the shooting started, they were gone. And partially of it is because of the overwhelming force. It has to be the case that elements within the military will stand up to the regime and support the protesters or whatever. So I think she will be right in the very long term, or China will descend into poverty and totalitarianism again. I think that the attempt to balance economic freedom with authoritarian regime is not sustainable. You either move towards more freedom or towards significantly less freedom. And right now we're moving towards less freedom. Whether that is the path or whether that is going to change. I mean, a lot of people said, and I said in my show that there was a possibility that Xi was out, and in October, when the Communist Party meets, they might kick him out. That did not happen. Xi has only consolidated his power further. Does not bode well for at least the short, medium term for China. Hopper Campbell. While Mamdani won on the same ballot, measures were passed deregulating housing development in New York City. Will the future of the mixed economy be greater deregulation while simultaneously growing welfare systems? Well, here's the thing that is not very much reported. Mamdani supported the deregulation. That is, Mamdani supported deregulating housing. He ran on a platform that both encouraged rent control and at the same time encouraged deregulation in the building of housing, so a greater housing supply. He is, supposedly part of the YIMBY, yes in my backyard, kind of the pro-housing growth part of the left. But I do think that's true. I mean, if you look at the Danish model, the Nordic model that they admire so much, that the left today thinks is the ultimate model, that model is basically a model of less regulation, significantly deregulation, and much more efficient, effective, depending on, effective for the goal, right? Not effective in the big scheme of things. But welfare state. So yes, I expect more redistribution and potentially less regulation, particularly when it comes to housing. There seems to be a consensus building that housing needs to be deregulated, and even the left, even the socialist left, the guy I debated yesterday was very, very pro deregulating housing. And some of the new housing should be built by the state, but some of it should be private industry, but deregulation was the theme. Housing, I don't know anything else. Andrew, do you think Tucker has a massive inferiority complex? He's awfully concerned the Jews don't see themselves as better than him. Why does he care? Rand did imply that Tui's evil flowed from feeling of inferiority. Look, I don't know. I don't like to attribute psychological motivations because I'm not a psychologist. I've told you this many times, Andrew. So I don't know. I mean, Tucker comes from a wealthy family. He very much has almost an aristocratic bearing, an aristocratic perspective. He really considers himself better than everybody else. I think that he is offended by the fact the Jews, of all people, are maybe in some cases more successful, richer, and have entered that part of society which they used to be banned from in the early part of the 20th century and 19th century. But I don't know what ultimately drives it. There's no question. I think that much adoption of evil ideas is driven by lack of self-esteem. But look, at the end of the day, it's lack of thinking. It is evasion. The psychological motivation for that, usually inferiority or lack of self-esteem, but I don't know. It just could be a choice. It could be a certain tradition. It could be, I don't know what he's adopting, but it's very well could be lack of self-esteem. Adam says, I never heard you mention that the current state of U.S. culture is a manifest consequence of the mass disminding of young Americans under the worst anti-philosophy of education. Have I missed something? No, I think I say it all the time. I talk about it all the time, that the state of American culture, the state of American youth is a consequence of the fact that they've been taught to emote and not to think. Now that's disminding. That's exactly the essence of what disminding is. I don't use that term This minding is not a term in my vocabulary. It's in yours, Adam, and you brought it up many times on the show. But I do emphasize over and over and over again that what the American educational system, progressive education in particular, but generally the American educational system does, is it emphasizes emotion. It emphasizes socialization and de-emphasizes thinking and thinking skills. And that is, the consequence of that is the anti-conceptual mentality that is dominant of both the left and the right today. They're unthinking ideologies, and therefore the unthinking, mal-educated people around us are attracted to them. All right, looks like Lincoln has submitted a 4-part question, so let's read through this and see. Any advice on someone in undergraduate trying to go to the intellectual public policy academic route career-wise? I initially assumed I'd go into finance, but fixing the garbage in in the universities and think tanks is needed. For reference, I don't know what that means, Lincoln. Of course it's needed, but what has that to do with you, right? So it's needed, does that mean you need to do it? We'll get to that in a minute. For reference, I'm currently an honors student at the University of Arizona's Philosophy, Politics, and Economics program. That's a good program. On the pre-law track. I'm pretty smart, top 5% SAT scores, who could probably get into any grad program or law program, short of Yale or Harvard. I'd like to pursue an economics master's alongside my JD, and perhaps even an econ PhD, but I'm not sure where to study. Most econ programs are anti-market with the exception of George Mason. Given I come from a comfortable family, tuition costs, nor the lower salaries compared to finance are an issue, since tuition costs, well, maybe are not an issue, can't tell if they're an issue. Since you've gone through both academia and ARI, what's your advice on entering this world? Well, first, I want to make sure that your motivation is right. You need to do what your values dictate. That is what you're going to enjoy doing. This is going to be your career. This is going to be where you spend most of your time. So don't go into, into think tank world or the intellectual world because it's needed. Go into it because you're passionate about it and you really want to do the work and you think you'll really enjoy it and you think this is where you'll be happy spending most of your life. So if you really decided you want to go into economics and you want to get a law degree and economic degree, I do actually think George Mason is a great place to go. Now you're going to struggle with the temptation. George Mason University is very good. The economics department is very good at convincing people that anarchy is the right political system. So you're going to have to fight that. It's going to be difficult because their professors are very, very smart and they make the best arguments possible for anarchy. And the more objectivism you know going into that program, the more you'll be able to resist the temptation to be absorbed by it. You could also go to Clemson, which has a decent econ department. I don't remember if they do PhDs. George Mason, they do. And they have a decent law school, where, for example, Adam Mossoff teaches in their law school. So they've got a decent law school and a good economics department. So it's a good place to go. At that point, once you have the PhD in economics, then you can decide: do I want to be an academic and go and teach, or do I want to come to the Ayn Rand Institute? And maybe at that point in the Ayn Rand University, there'll be a demand for somebody to teach economics. I know today there is a demand for somebody to come in and teach economics, and become a professor at the Ayn Rand Institute. So one thing I would encourage you to do, and I can't remember if you're already doing this or not, but one thing I'd encourage you to do, Lincoln, is take as many classes as you can at the ARU, from ARI. Take as many classes as you can. Let them know that you want to become an intellectual, so that they give you kind of put you on an accelerated track. get involved with all of the undergraduate and graduate programs at the Ayn Rand Institute while you're getting your PhD in economics. Even if it slows you down, do not stop taking classes from the Institute. Keep taking classes at ARU. Stay involved with ARU, because it will help you resist kind of many of the arguments and give you the tools to argue back against the arguments your professors will make. And it will give you an opening once you graduate with that PhD to come and work at ARU. But that's what we're looking for. We're looking for people who have PhDs in economics and really know economics to come and teach at ARU. And also know objectivism, right? Importantly, know economics and know objectivism to come and teach at ARU. So absolutely, go and I see no problem in pursuing that track if that's really what you want to do, versus the finance career you seem to have wanted originally. So figure out what you really want to do and go and do it. And the Institute will create opportunities for you to become an intellectual within the objectivist world. Once you have a PhD, there won't be any problem. If you're a PhD and an objectivist, there are going to be lots of opportunities for you. Lincoln continues, your point on debunking the housing meme gave me an idea for you to make its own show. The idea that life was better in the 50s or 80s is very common with wage stagnation since 1971 and affordable 50s housing being related. Yeah, I mean, I've talked about that many, many times on the show. I could do a whole show just debunking that, absolutely. But yeah. All right, Nikoka, could you make a show about your favorite composers and their best pieces? Yeah, I'll probably do it as a members-only show, so I'm glad to see you're a member. That's a good idea for the next members-only show. Thomas, where does the claim that logic leads to authoritarianism come from? Peikoff raises this in ominous parallels too. How did logic get tied to apathy? I'm not sure why apathy. I assume you've seen how did logic get tied to authoritarianism. I think it goes, in a sense, all the way back to Plato, though Plato never used the term, I don't think, used the term logic in this context. But the idea is that, logic, reason, rationality, only some people have access to that, or let's say really, really smart people can do that much better than the rest of us, and therefore those people should guide our lives. We are not very rational, we are weak, we are not that smart. We should let smart people make decisions for us, because they'll make better decisions for us, because we can sustain our lives. So that's, I think, where it comes from. It comes from this idea that logic, reason, rationality are qualities that are associated with intelligence, and since most people are not intelligent enough to really to live up to that, execute on logic and all of that, we need guides, we need authorities to tell us how to live and what to do. I think that's a connection. Jonathan, thank you, Adam, for quitting Heritage. Great shows lately, Yaron. Thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate it. Jonathan continues, Yaron Brook is the James Brown of philosophy, the hardest working man in show business. Thank you. Liam, ironic when Bill O'Reilly is the only major Republican to come out and condemn Tucker and Candace Owen. Wow, Bill O'Reilly did that. All right. Bill O'Reilly, my nemesis from the 2000s. It's good to know he's still around. Hopper Campbell, since Goldwater, did the conservatives typically place their capitalism before their Christianity? Now it's the other way around. No, I mean, conservatives never placed their capitalism before their Christianity. And indeed, they've never been capitalist. And this is why conservatives, what government has been conservative since, what government has been pro-capitalist since Goldwater? I mean, maybe arguably for a short period of time, Reagan, you could argue at least verbally, and in terms of rate of growth of spending, non-military spending was very low, and there was some deregulation. But overall, conservatives have not been stringent advocates for capitalism. It's always been weak. Now it's completely gone. That is the difference. Now it's completely gone. But they were never never placed a big emphasis on capitalism. And whatever capitalism there were, as Irving Kristol would say, we'll give it 2 cheers. And Michael Novak, 1 cheer. So even the most adamant conservatives would only give capitalism 2 or even 1 cheer, whereas they give Christianity 3 cheers. You know. So yeah, it was always Christianity first. James, is it likely the Supreme Court will throw out the tariffs before the end of the year? Will the stock market boom? I think the Supreme Court will throw out the tariffs. I don't know about the timing. I haven't looked into it, but it's likely, I think, before the end of the year. Maybe I shouldn't say that because I'm not sure. Will the stock market boom? I don't know, because the stock market has so much positive already priced in, and it's already pricing, I think, a significant weakening of tariffs, if nothing else. And also remember, Trump won't give up on tariffs. He'll just use another statute to increase them. This is a cornerstone of his agenda. So I don't know if the stock market will boom. I don't like to make stock market predictions. Rue Downs, I know from personal experience that new listeners find you by commenting on conservatives and leftists. They need to hear a new perspective. So it's my commenting on conservatives and leftists that causes them to find me. Yeah, I'm going to continue. And I agree, they need to hear a new perspective, and they're out there, and they're listening, and hopefully we will sway some of them. Lincoln, thank you for the sticker. Stephen Hopper, thank you for the sticker. Appreciate it. Michael, I think Alex Epstein should take advantage of the current political climate and create an Epstein file that gets captured by Google searches but directs people to his website. I know that's meant to be funny and so on, but you have to be really careful, because people like, because of the similarities named, you do not want to be lumped together. Particularly in the kind of environment that we live right now. Not your average algorithm. Did you see Elon Musk's response to critics of his $1 trillion pay package? He was practically citing Galt's speech. Yeah, I mean, there was strong elements of Ayn Rand in that, and of course, Elon Musk has read Ayn Rand and has, in the past, quoted Ayn Rand and quoted Atlas Shrugged. So it was pretty good. It was pretty good, and he's absolutely right. Good for Elon. I mean, as I've said in the past, Elon is infuriating because, you love him one day and you hate him the next, and he's a complete. He creates complete whiplash, right? He says great stuff, and you go, "Whoa, this is fantastic," and he says awful stuff, and then, "Oh my God, why did he say?" He's all over the place, and he does not have a consistent base, a consistent ideology, a consistent framework, consistent principles. I wish he did. The world would be much, much better if he did. Hopper Campbell, do you get the highest super chat revenue of any podcaster relative to the size of the audience? I think, what was I, number 2 or something like that? I'm way up there relative to the size of our audience in terms of super chat, yes. I don't know if I'm number 1, but I'm close. Kim says, Wednesday was great. Too many wacky Christian conservatives at the event, though. Bummed you didn't debate the priests. Well, it was interesting. The priest, it was in an auditorium owned by a church. And the Catholic priest of the church was there in the audience. You're sitting in the back. But one of his seminary students was in the front wearing a collar, right? And he was there. And the fascinating thing about the seminary student is that he was constantly rolling his eyes and shaking his head when the people defending Christianity were speaking, because they were talking nonsense, both historically and theologically. And he was, doing this when I was speaking. And when the vote came at the end of whether you think the proposition is right or wrong, Christianity will destroy the West, he abstained. And I don't think he abstained in the beginning. I think in the beginning he was clearly against the proposition. I think I made a good case that he acknowledged that at least was historically true. And I think he was embarrassed to some extent by the people defending Christianity. And it was fascinating to watch his face as they were talking. So this is a seminary student. And he actually wanted to make a speech, and I wish they'd let him, but he wasn't one of the people they let give speeches. All right, Clark, misery is always the goal of the envious, the momentary thrill they get from making you as miserable as they are. Yes, that is envy for you. Christian, glad to see you in church Wednesday. Yes. If Christianity defines Western civilization, would those Christians consider countries like Armenia in Latin America to be Western? No. Well, it depends. Maybe some of them would, but many of them wouldn't because they're associated with a certain type of Christianity affiliated with Europe and Europeans. But that would have been an interesting question to ask them. I don't know. I don't know if they would consider it. They also would separate Armenia, for example, is Orthodox Christianity, and I think they associate Western civilization with the Western Church, not with the Eastern Church, not with the Greek Orthodox or the Russian Orthodox Church. And that, I think, is how they separate out Western civilization. So maybe not with regard to Armenia, but yes, with regard to Latin America. What about Africa, that is becoming more and more Christian? I doubt that they would consider Africa Western civilization, even though they're Christian. I mean, the population of Africa, Christianity is growing dramatically, particularly Catholicism. So I think at the end of the day, for them, Western civilization is a combination of race and religion. Jamie, golf courses use chemicals that have been shown to significantly increase risk of Parkinson's, other neurological conditions. Does the public have the right to block private enterprise from building golf courses close to them? Well, I mean, this is simple. People should sue the golf courses that have used those chemicals. And if they win the lawsuit and they get damages, then that'll dramatically raise the cost of building a golf course and make it impossible, prevent them from using those kind of chemicals. Of course, if it's really proven, and I doubt that it's proven, I'm very, very skeptical of the fact that of the idea that chemicals in golf courses are responsible for Parkinson's. Very skeptical of that. But let's assume it's true. Then if it's unequivocal and it wins in a court case, then yeah, the EPA or Congress could pass a law banning the use of those chemicals because they clearly cause harm. They're clearly a violation of individual rights. But you'd have to prove it. And I haven't seen, I mean, if that was true, I would expect there to be massive lawsuits in the works and a lot of pressure on the EPA to ban these chemicals. I don't know that I've seen that. I'm not an expert. I haven't followed this, but I haven't seen it. Thomas, why debate politics if it's downstream of ethics and epistemology and metaphysics? Why not debate epistemology and metaphysics instead? Because nobody will debate and nobody will come to a debate where you talk about epistemology and metaphysics. Nobody's interested in that. If you debate politics, you bring up epistemological and ethical issues in the debate. The debate is filled with ethical issues. If you debate capitalism, you're talking about its morality. You're talking about whether it's ethical, and therefore you have to define standards of ethics. But in the way that you debate, you model, you show a proper epistemology. You're showing your audience how to do epistemology, how to think about the world. Epistemology is not just technical. Epistemology for most people will never, really examine and think through and fully accept measurement omission in concept formation. They won't get that. What you need to teach people is how to on a day-to-day basis think, how to use concepts, how to use their mind. And the best way to do that is not to teach epistemology or to teach metaphysics. The best way to do that is to model it. And one of the ways to model it is to debate politics. Hopefully, on this show, I try to model good epistemology and good metaphysics. I'm reality-oriented. I seek the truth. I want facts. You know, it's not about people's emotions. It's about reality. It's about facts. I look to integrate. I look to induce, to look at reality and facts and repeated patterns and what's going on and understanding causality. That is what people need to learn about epistemology and metaphysics. They don't, it's the elevate thinking. It's not the technicalities of metaphysics and epistemology that they need to learn and they need to get. And the reality is that if you actually did ethics, epistemology, metaphysics, or particularly metaphysics and epistemology as subjects, nobody would come. Nobody's interested in learning those things except for a few philosophers. What you need is to show how to do it, how to think, how to approach topics. And that's what you model when you debate political or cultural issues. Good question, though. Andrew, why do you think the self-declared masters of negotiation, who is our president, decided to sit on the sidelines during the government shutdown and not try to lead negotiations? He was utterly uninterested. Well, because he's utterly uninterested. He's not interested. You know, from his perspective, you know, it was an opportunity to make the Democrats look bad. He thought that, at least. He has a certain nihilistic tendency to see things broken. He likes to break stuff, and this is an opportunity to break stuff. He fired a lot of people. He thought it's an opportunity to fire. Now he's being forced to hire them all back by the deal, the negotiated deal at the end. So I just don't think, I think it was his way or the highway. That's what he told Democrats. And he wanted to break the Democrats. So he wasn't interested in negotiating. He's not interested in the mechanics of government. He's not interested in legislation generally. That doesn't interest him. He'll do it, but it's not what drives him. It's not what gets him. Andrew, do you think the standing ovation by the religionists was out of respect for your commitment to rational argument despite their disagreement, or were they converted to the content of your argument? No, it wasn't that they were converted, because we had a vote at the end, and some changed their mind, but very few. It was respect for my ability to argue, respect for my passion, and for my skill in presenting my case. It was clearly that, and I got a lot of comments to that effect afterwards. It wasn't that maybe some of them, it caused some cognitive dissonance and caused them to rethink their position, which I think is true. But again, it's modeling the right approach, which I think has ultimately a long-term impact on people changing their minds. They might not change their mind at the debate, but it might cause them to rethink some of the things they believe, which leads them into a whole sequence of rethinking a lot of what they believe. Maz from Oz. Just thank you for doing what you do. I appreciate it, Maz from Oz. Thank you. Jamie, before EMTALA in 1986, hospitals could turn away emergencies. In a full private healthcare system, would some people in emergencies get turned away? Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think most people would not, because they'd have insurance. Almost everybody would. Some people wouldn't have insurance, but there'd be a charity wing, a charity fund of a hospital. But some hospitals might not have that fund, and might not have the capability of providing charitable services, and they would turn them away. Yep. I think it would be very, very rare. It would be the exceptional case. And again, incentive to get insurance. And you say, people can't afford it. Well, it's an incentive to be able to afford it. And of course, if you privatize healthcare completely, then people would be richer. If you made the world a free market, people would be richer, and insurance would be easily affordable. And that's what we should strive for. Jamie says, with privatized roads, would there be some traffic slowdowns due to toll stops? Would there be speed limits? And would you be allowed to drink and drive? I don't think there would be slowdowns because of tolls, because today tolls are electronic. It could be tracked by GPS. You wouldn't even need a machine. All it would do is you would track everywhere you drive, and it could bill you based on which road you drove on, to which owners do you owe the money. It would be a pretty simple, straightforward process. There'd be companies that specialize in providing tolling services to owners of roads. And if you wanted to drive on those roads, you'd have to get a sticker with a GPS tracking, and you'd buy a service from one of the service providers that made it possible for you to do that. So no, I don't think so. Would there be speed limits? Yes. Speed limits determined by the owner of the roads, and they would have a strong incentive to do that because they don't want accidents on the roads that make them less usable. They want to be able to have stores on the roads and pedestrians and so on, which provide revenues. So all of that, absolutely, there would be speed limits. There might also be speed limits. It might also turn out that insurance companies own the roads, and they would have speed limits because they would want fewer accidents, and because they would have fewer claims to pay. Would you allow drink and drive? No. To drink and drive represents a real threat to other people. Therefore, the police would stop you for drinking and driving because of the threat you represent to others. So, if you are driving in a risky way, the police would have the authority to stop you and test you for alcohol. It is you exhibiting risky behavior that is a justification for stopping you. Stephen, thoughts on the Count of Monte Cristo, the novel, themes, movie version, etc.? I mean, there are lots of movie versions. I generally like the Count of Monte Cristo. It's basically a revenge story. I like revenge stories. Injustice is done to this man. He spends time in prison. He escapes, and then he basically, destroys his enemies. Cool. I love that. Destroying your enemies is a good thing. Somebody who committed a huge injustice against you should be destroyed. So I like the theme of Monte Cristo, justice. Basically, it's all about justice and bringing justice to the world after massive injustice. I don't remember any particular movie version of it that was good. I'm sure there's several, so I'd encourage people to look for it and definitely read the book. Read the book. It's a good book. Count of Monte Cristo. Jamie, have you heard of the ostrich cull recently in British Columbia, and what's your opinion on it? If so, does the government have a right to kill private-owned, suspected to be sick with bird flu animals? I think only if they represent a risk to either human beings, and it has to be an objective risk to human beings, or the property of other people, that is, other people's birds. So there has to be an objective risk. Yeah, I don't know the details about the British Columbia culling of the birds, but yes, if the risk rises to such a degree where if this bird infects, and there's no way to isolate the birds, and if the birds infect somebody else's birds, they will all die and destroy that person's livelihood. That's a real legitimate risk. Or if this virus has the potential, a real potential, not just a small probability, and all of this is to be worked out in law. And I don't have the answers in terms of the exact numbers, but if this has the potential to really jump to human beings and it's imminent and it's going to happen, yeah, I think some protections have to be put in place. Exactly how you do it and what you do, you'd have to be an expert to determine that, and I'm certainly not an expert. But it's a real issue that needs to be solved. How you solve it exactly, that is up to philosophers of law and epidemiologists and property rights experts to have to figure out exactly. Lincoln, Armenia is a perfect example of Christianity ruined a culture. Hyper-smart people who are successful when secular in the U.S., but the Christian Middle East country is so impoverished. Yeah, I mean, I think that's true everywhere. The more fundamentalist religious you are, the less, as a culture, the less successful you're going to be. True of Christianity, true of Judaism, true of Islam, true of all of them. As I said, I'm reading this amazing book about the Islamic Central Asian, they call it Enlightenment, but Golden Age. It's truly stunning what they did and why they did it, how they did it, and how it ended in dramatic fashion. And the dark ages of Islam have lasted 800 years, 900 years, 800 something years. Pretty amazing how long their dark ages have been. Michael, consistently successful immigrants are non-Christians. Indians, Chinese, Jews, etc. Hispanics don't perform as well because they are curbed by Catholicism. I mean, that's an interesting explanation for, I haven't thought about that, for immigrant success. Probably true. Nigerians who succeed in America are Christians typically, so that might be an exception. But yeah, I'd have to look into that and look at the stats and get a better clue on it. But yeah, that makes sense. All right, guys, I have to go. I didn't give credit to my sponsors today. I will make up for that on Sunday. You can check out the sponsors down below. Actually, add Defenders of Capitalism to our sponsors list in the comments below. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Super Chatters. You did amazing today. You met our 3-hour goal as we approach the end of the second hour. So I very much appreciate that. A lot of that has to do with Troy, but also the rest of you chimed in. Lots of $20 questions and some good stickers, but a lot of $20 questions that really got us to where we needed to be. A lot of $10 questions. So thank you. I will see you all on Sunday. No show tomorrow, but I'm hoping for a show that we'll do a show on Sunday. See you then. Bye, everybody.